Welcome to EB5 Investment Voice, where attorney insights intersects with immigration investments. If you are a foreign investor, domestic fund manager, or enterprising entrepreneur and want to get the most out of the EB5 program, you have come to the right place. I'm Mark Deal, and I'll be your co-host on this journey. I'm joined by your host, Mona Shaw, and other attorneys at Mona Shaw & Associates, as well as immigration leaders from around the world. So let's get into EB5 Investment Voice.
You know, Mark and Rebecca, we've had quite a lot of episodes in these past 7 years on the CBI programs and golden visa programs in Europe and other countries. And somebody asked me recently why we do that on our EB5 podcast series. And I was explaining to them that really EB5 is a golden visa because it is a visa which leads to residency, which eventually leads to citizenship. And we should not look at any of these programs in a vacuum, especially not EB5. We really should know what's going on in the rest of the world.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Mona. We end up pulling EB5 as a separate visa from the rest of the world. Typical of America, right?
Right. It's like New York time, right?
But it is. It's an investment program, just like the other programs out there. It is a bit different. It's more employment-based or job creation-based, whereas the others are more real estate focused or contribution to the country. But it is ultimately an investment that leads to, like you said, permanent residence and then eventually citizenship.
And we did have Christian on a couple of episodes ago to tell us a little bit about what's going on in parts of the world, especially the Irish program and the Portuguese program. But one of the main areas, Rebecca, that we've been dealing with for all these years has been the Caribbean.
Yes. Yeah. The Caribbean has been actually pretty strong in what's called the CBI, Citizenship by Investment program. And whereas the European programs focus more on residency first.
You're right, Rebecca. And Caribbean really started the whole CBI, a citizenship by investment, because you actually get citizenship. I feel that it really deserves its own spot.
Yeah. And I think it has one of the older programs as well. I think, we'll get into it a bit more, but St. Kitts and Nevis has been one of the older programs out there. And that has been, it hasn't closed. It's strong and it keeps going.
And we can't explore this topic on our own, can we?
Well, we could, but it's nice to have the expertise of other industry experts.
Today, joining us, we have Patrick Peters. Patrick is a chartered accountant and has lived and worked in almost all continents and brings more than 15 years of immigration industry experience with him. Together with his team, he has raised more than $12 billion in capital for immigrant investor programs and has assisted more than 9,000 investor families. Mona, he's also become one of Antigua's and Barbuda's top citizenship by investment program experts since the program's inception a decade ago. I don't know of any other experts that have that long of a track record.
No, not at all. I would say he's the expert. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you, Mona. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. I've been following it for a while, so thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. And wasn't your partner on our podcast series a couple of years ago?
Yes, that's right. Patrick McCarthy did a spotlight on some of the Canadian programs a couple of years ago.
Right, but you don't really focus so much on Canada. Your focus really is the Caribbean.
Yeah, that's right. Our group of companies has been around doing this for 25 years, and our bread and butter, where we started, is Canada. We do have definitely market leaders, industry leaders in-house there, but 10 years ago, I moved away from the Canadian immigration program and came, as you guys said, the Antigua and Barbuda expert. And so that's been my journey these last 10 years. My focus is the Caribbean citizenship by investment programs.
Oh, well, we had Christian Newsom on our show a couple of weeks ago, who did talk about the closure of Portugal. And of course, I would be remiss not to ask you, have you noticed anything change because of the closure of those programs?
Yeah, definitely. It's been very interesting ride, let's say Q1 of 2023 with the Portugal closure. In the short term, what we're seeing is some of the European programs like Greece and Spain are getting a bit of attention because the clients need to pivot away from Portugal into another program and they have Europe in mind already. Our business being in the Caribbean, we're seeing a lot of the promoters now looking for alternative products, alternative destinations to recommend to their clients. And that's benefited us tremendously.
With the European program, obviously Portugal being one of the top, Spain is up there. There's also rumors that Spain is also on the verge of maybe closing its golden visa program as well. And I know that Spain and like for Malta, for instance, these programs are also very expensive. So I think the closure of the European programs and seeing others maybe being on the verge of it and the expense of it has led to a lot of people looking at the Caribbean as the other alternative option.
The Caribbean has been that stable rock. It's just been there for a long time and it's not going anywhere. Some of these programs are enshrined in constitution, but they all have their own acts. They're really strong have a legal backbone, and economies rely on it. So we don't see these programs going anywhere anytime soon, unlike what we're seeing in Europe, which is a bit understandable. These programs were created by an economic downturn in the early 2010s, right? And so now that those real estate markets have popped back up, the governments are questioning, they still need these programs. But Antigua and St. Kitts in the Caribbean, they still need these programs.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you say it's enshrined by the Constitution, because EB5 is also within the legislation, that the actual EB5 is the fifth preference category of the employment-based visas from an act which was put into place by Congress in 1990. So one way or another, we will have an investment program in the United States. It just depends on the form. And I do believe that it is enshrined in the Constitution in almost all of the Caribbean, correct?
I wouldn't say necessarily the Constitution, but they all have their own act for sure.
Yes, I meant legislation, actually. I should say
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right. You're absolutely right. This isn't just temporary regulations, basically. They all have their own act, and to change those acts requires cabinet support, and it's a big deal.
So the cost factor is a huge element that we've seen, but as well as the cost factor, and you can explain, how the cost factor differentiates, say, from Grenada to St. Kitts and Antigua. But what are you seeing of the type of person who wants to come into the Caribbean programs?
Of course, there's a wide-ranging type of client. The typical profile is successful entrepreneur or executive of a company that is looking for improved travel mobility.
Interesting.
And they're not interested in selling their business or quitting their jobs and putting their 2-year-old under one arm, their suitcase under the other arm, their wife on their back or their spouse on their back, and getting on a plane and moving to a new country. No, the typical client is extremely happy where they're living. They're making good income, and they're just looking for better travel mobility, a little bit of feeling of stability and security in their life, some tax planning. That's the type of client that we're looking at. Unlike in the EB5, the Canadian programs, even to an extent the European programs, those are residency programs. They're destination countries. People move there, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's the benefit of the Caribbean program in the fact that they can get you citizenship, a passport fairly quickly. At the same time, there's really no residency requirements, right? Some of these countries you can go and you may have to spend maybe 5 days. Some countries don't have any days that you have to actually spend in the country.
Yeah, none of them have a residency requirement except Antigua. Antigua has a 5-day residency requirement, if you can call it that. It's 5 days over a period of 5 years. So our clients come for 1 week, and that's when they can, build ties with the country, spend some time there, get to know it. So it's extremely convenient, as you said, Rebecca. It takes about 6 months, and we even send the citizenship certificates and passport by courier. Like the client doesn't even need to visit to lodge their application or to pick up their documentation at any point at all.
Grenada has had a lot of attention in America. One of those islands which hasn't had the attention, and I think it deserves it, is Antigua. And Rebecca, you went to visit Antigua. It was actually one of Patrick's projects, right?
Yeah. Yes, as we always say, we always conduct our due diligence. Yeah, so we did. We made a visit to Canada, met you and your team. We went to Antigua, visited a project. And like we said, it's really important to do that. And we were talking about this, that Antigua is also a destination where we always think the Caribbean, yeah, everyone just wants, you use the passport for ease of travel, but Antigua could actually be one of those destination countries to actually work and live.
Yeah, out of the five, I've been to all of them, and out of the five, definitely that's a place where you could set roots. The economy is big enough. There's a social scene. The medical industry is good. The education is good. It's a travel hub. Simple things that you wouldn't think of coming from larger countries where most of us live in metropolitan centers. You can go to a large supermarket and buy a brand new TV. It may sound ridiculous, but in some of the islands, it's not that simple. And so Antigua is a place that most of us could live, set down roots if we chose to, or if we had to, if we felt the need to. Because another thing that people look at is the way I call it, it's like a plan B, or it's the insurance that the insurance company can't sell you.
Right,
so those
right.
are also the types of clients that look into this.
Do you have big brand hotels in Antigua?
There's a couple of bigger brand hotels, like not Hilton and Marriott, the ones that we stay in when we travel for business or know all over the world. But, there's Sandals is a well-known chain across the Caribbean. And this large group of companies called Elite Island Resorts, they own a big group of hotel and resorts in Antigua, especially, but across many jurisdictions in the Caribbean. The brand isn't well known on a global scale, but for people who travel to the Caribbean, they know Elite Island Resorts quite well, especially from the US, Canada, and the UK.
Patrick, how are the taxes in these islands?
There's no personal tax.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Let's move. Coming from New York, where we pay city, state, federal taxes, I mean, that's like, really? There's no taxes?
Yeah, it's amazing. In terms of tax planning for high net worth individuals, high income earners, there's no income tax, there's no capital gains tax, there's no inheritance tax. The list goes on. There are no personal taxes whatsoever. So it's very interested when it comes to trust planning, offshore asset protection, those kinds of things.
Maybe I should be putting in an application for citizenship.
I think you should, Mona. You fit the profile.
No, seriously. Do you get people who really want to just escape taxes coming as well?
Yeah, definitely. Over the last 3 years, a growing market has been North America, the UK, Europe, Australia, individuals who are looking into tax planning, as you said, and also quite interestingly, are questioning the direction of their government and are just looking for a bit of a backup plan, as I was saying. So yes, tax planning is a big, big driver for that clientele, especially. And from anywhere else, some of the people who want to protect their offshore wealth and their offshore assets.
Well, Rebecca and I just recently had a couple of clients who have a lot of real estate in these islands. And Antigua, just like Grenada, is popular mainly because of the university, because it has the medical schools which are affiliated with the US. And I think they are top medical schools.
Yes, both in Antigua and Grenada.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have St. George, in Grenada, which is the one Antigua.
Antigua has the American University of Antigua College of Medicine, or shortened to AUA. Yeah, so both have been in the top, schools in the Caribbean.
Right. So one of our developers just builds apartment buildings for parents who want to keep coming out and seeing their children, or children who, if they want to live in their own apartment. But it seems like that's also an avenue.
You have the donation route and you have the real estate route. And within the real estate, are you seeing more of it going towards resorts, or have you seen where it's going into for housing, even for medical students, for their parents? Are you seeing that long-term housing market as well?
Yeah, so in Antigua, most of the real estate projects for investment as approved by the government are hotel and resorts. One of our projects is a residential gated community. So we have single family homes, or over there they call them villas, and a plot of land. And it's that simple. There's a lack of housing and gated communities in Antigua. So we take the investment of our client who's overseas, buy a plot of land, build a house, and then put a local tenant in it. So usually a mid-level manager or sometimes an executive of a bank or an insurance company that's been sent on a 2-year contract, a French chef who's been sent on a contract for a hotel. Those are the kind of tenants that then occupy these homes. And so the client overseas has an investment in a hard asset, name on title deed, freestanding villa. And we have a good quality tenant for a minimum 1 year up to 5-year period. And that's the kind of investment that we sell in Antigua in terms of housing.
How do you find the right projects, Patrick?
Rebecca mentioned it earlier, it's due diligence. We have CPAs, lawyers, and finance people on the team, like not, it's not outsourced. We've been doing this for Guy Pilote, the founder of our group of companies, our boss, our mentor. He's been doing this for 35 years. So it's about getting boots on the ground, knowing who's behind the project, and having a bit of a business sense and looking at the numbers.
So from Antigua, let's jump to a different island, St. Kitts and Nevis, another one which is often ignored, Rebecca.
Well, it's ignored because I think everyone sees the options like we have the US programs, you have the European programs, but I think in the Caribbean, as part of the Caribbean program, is probably one of the top destinations just because it's one of the eldest and it's one of the stable programs out there, if I'm not mistaken, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. If you look at it from the EB5 industry through the EB5 lens, you've been hearing a lot about Grenada these last few years because they had E2. But if you look at it through the CIP industry, citizenship by investment industry, St. Kitts has been extremely popular. You hit the nail on the head, Rebecca. It was the first program of its kind in the Caribbean. It became popular around 2010, 2011. And so St. Kitts is kind of that brand that people know because it's been around for a long time. So if I'm interested in getting a passport, well, oftentimes I'll look into my community, my business partners, my siblings, friends, other people around me who may have already obtained a second passport, a second citizenship. And because St. Kitts has been around for a long time, because they've done a good job marketing themselves, they've had the largest volume over the last 15 years. So there's a good chance that people in my circle have already had the St. Kitts passport. So naturally, I feel comfortable gravitating towards that program. And so because of that, you hit the nail on the head, Rebecca. It's been extremely popular and very well known throughout the industry.
Haven't you recently had some legislation changes as well in St. Kitts and Nevis?
Yeah, in December 26th, actually. I think the industry won't soon forget that date because people with Christian backgrounds were all celebrating Christmas, and this news dropped out of nowhere that all these changes were happening. And it was similar to RIA in EB5, actually. A lot of the changes, they just wiped out all real estate projects. The same way USCIS tried to do with
but we litigated here.
Did well, yeah. What else did they do? They modified the price structure. So their donation program, or it's officially called the SGF contribution option, they modified the price structure to have a limited time offer. They reduced the price a little bit, and they are promising that all new applicants until the end of June benefit from expedited processing. So instead of a 3-4 months approval time, you're looking at a 60-day approval time.
Oh, gosh. And what is the typical cost of all of these programs, Patrick?
It varies quite a bit from country to country, and within each country, investment option to investment option. Typically, these programs have 2 investment options, okay? At a high level, it's a contribution where you pay money, walk away from those funds, and that's it. You never have to think about your investment again. Option number 2 is a real estate investment that you have to hang on for X number of years. So if you're looking at the contribution option, it will range anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000, also depending on your family size, single applicant up to 4, 5, 6 people. And so that would be the range as what we call the walk away option. You pay money, you don't have to think about it again, 100 to 200,000. And the real estate option is a $200,000 5-year investment, typically, plus government fees. And those can add up quite quickly. It can go anywhere as low as like 30,000 for a family of 4 in Antigua. Whereas let's say in St. Kitts, you have a family of 4, you you pay 25,000 for the principal applicant, and then X per spouse and per child. So that can add up 50, 60, 70,000 in additional government fees as well.
Well, with so much difference in price, why would anybody go for the real estate option?
Yeah.
Some people like to have an asset that they can resell in 5 years.
Ah, of course, of course.
Makes a lot of sense.
Right. So if you buy $200,000 worth of property, in 5 years you sell it for 200,000. Well, all you had, your outlay was the government fees of $30 to $50, $60,000.
What have you seen in the real estate market as far as reselling? Have you seen success in that? Is it guaranteed that you get your investment back after the 5 years, or is there any chance that you may lose a bit because of the market at that time? What have you seen?
That's a fun question. And we definitely don't have enough time. And I don't know how much controversy like on your podcast.
We like controversy.
I know.
Right? Yeah. So what I have learned, I can say this is, when you have guaranteed buybacks, be wary, right? It's so easy to walk away from that. It's impossible to enforce it. And so it's usually just a marketing tool. What have I seen in the industry? It's been hard to resell. Like all finance industry, you have to be careful where you're investing. The EB5 is no different, right?
But at least you actually have something for your money to come and live if you ever wanted to do that. And I think that is an advantage in itself. I would personally rather do that than a donation, which is a donation. You won't ever get that back.
Yeah. And you don't have to sell it back in the 5 years, right? You can hold on to it if you wanted to even longer, if the market wasn't down. COVID just happened. Obviously, things are down at this point. So I would be the same. I'd want to go into real estate as well.
Or give it to Airbnb even.
Yeah, exactly. You can make an income, earnings from real estate. And I think it's just good to know. That's why we have someone like you, Patrick, who is on, and you see things out there and what investors should be looking at when they're looking into these programs.
Absolutely. This is where, my CA background comes in handy, and our team's experience. And we're really, really lucky in Antigua to have an exclusive partnership with Elite Island Resorts. They're the largest real estate developer and manager in Antigua. They've been doing this for 40 years, and their cost of build is lower than everybody else because they have economies of scale, and they're not out to get the investor. They're really out there to build long-term relationships. So what we've seen with our projects has really, really been unique to the industry. Anybody who works with us, anybody who's had clients invest with us, know that there is a safe investment and everybody's getting their return, and nobody's even asked to sell yet after, we've been doing this since 2014. So it's almost 10 years now. So you're right. Like, finding the proper real estate project, performing your proper due diligence, working with the professionals you trust is paramount in making the right investments.
The EB5 program was really given a boost by certain countries. And back in 2014, 15, 16, 17, it was dominated, like really dominated by China. And post 2017, it has been other countries like Latin America and India and Vietnam. Do you see the same countries typically coming to the Caribbean? Or at this time, are we looking at Russia and countries like that where there is political upheaval going on?
Well, touched on Russia very quickly. Russia's out with the sanctions right away. Most of the countries came out and said, we cannot accept Russian nationals anymore. We can debate day and night whether that's right or not, but that's factually what the governments decided. Grenada, their policy, I can't remember if it's officially or unofficially, but they remained open for Russians. But where they had problems, even if some of the countries were saying open-minded to accepting Russians and Belarusians, is the banking system. You couldn't move money. So Russia, in practice and in law, have pretty much been out of the Caribbean for the last little bit. So to answer your question on that, in terms of the demand, it's really interesting. It's very widespread. It's not like the EB5 or the Canadian program where 80-90% historically have come from China. Yes, the Caribbean has been dominated by China, but to a lesser extent, I would say 40 to 50%. In general, we look at it 40% It was China, 40% the Middle East, 20% rest of world in general.
You know, it's so interesting. Every time we market in the Middle East, I really have to make a point of two things. When I talk about the EB5 and America, I say one wife, not two. And, and the second thing is I say no mother-in-law, because you can bring your mother-in-law into the Caribbean, right?
Yeah, this is amazing. And here we can spotlight Antigua. Antigua has the most favorable definition for dependents amongst the countries, but in general, they're all quite good. And Antigua, what you can do, your children, as long as they're up to 30 years old and financially dependent, they can be included. Like you said, your parents and your parents-in-law, so the spouse's parents, 55 years of age and above, as long as they're financially dependent. And then you can go, if you look at the family tree, you go up and down, but you also go sideways. You could bring your siblings. The only requirement is being unmarried. Mm-hmm. So a sibling that is either divorced, never married, or widowed can be part of the application as a dependent. It doesn't matter if they're 50 years old or 30 years old or 70 years old. It doesn't matter if they're billionaire or they are financially dependent. None of that matters as long as they're unmarried. So you have siblings, you have children, you have parents.
That's so attractive for a lot of our investors, Rebecca, right? Especially investors from India.
Yeah, where they can include, because I think a lot of investors from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, those types of countries where family is their in-laws or mother and father, it's really important to have. And it's even an addition to have siblings, unmarried siblings, to get added onto that petition as well. But in addition to that, Patrick, all these great benefits that you can add on to that, but also, the flexibility of travel. You can, the passport for Antigua allows you into 150 plus countries?
Yeah, close. 166 now. They just signed with Serbia about a month ago.
Oh, gosh. But you can't come into Canada and America, though, right?
No, that's right. Applicants still have to apply for a visa to enter Canada, US. There are lots of stories. We serve immigration practitioners, so I don't work with the clients directly. But I do hear a lot of stories. The immigration lawyers who help their clients get a passport. And then, let's say a Nigerian applicant couldn't get a Canadian or US visa for a while, or if they did, it was 3 months or 6 months. Now they can maybe have access to 2, 3, 5 years, 10-year visas, thanks to having a second passport. So although they don't have visa free, there is a benefit there.
Well, a lot of them still can come into the Schengen countries in Europe, right?
Correct. The United Kingdom, all Schengen region, Switzerland, India, Singapore. Yeah, the list goes on. It's a very interesting travel passport.
Is there any reason for that? Like a historical reason, or is it because of them being an ex-colony?
Yeah, it's because they're part of the Commonwealth. A lot of and they're not poor countries. Mm-hmm. So there's no fear of the, let's say, illegal migration. There's less risk to it.
Actually, you're right. At the Queen's funeral, I did see the delegates from all of these countries.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting.
I think, too, you can get certain types of benefits if being part of the Commonwealth into the UK. So that's a major part of having that.
Some of the universities will offer scholarships for, regions like CARICOM, as a region. Mm-hmm. Some things that are less published is some of these schools have quotas, right, where they're accepting students from which regions. So one of the benefit is if you're applying as an Antiguan citizen instead of an Indian national or a Chinese national, there may be less competition when you're trying to get into that top school.
Well, that's really interesting. And that's a fact I did not know, because so many of our investors are really reinvesting or going for CBI for their children.
Absolutely. And this is the really cool thing of having dual or triple or multiple nationalities and passports is you can't even think of all the ways you will benefit from them until one day you want to do something and you realize, oh, I can't because of this passport. Oh, but wait, I have another passport. And so why not leverage that?
The freedom and flexibility, yeah.
It's incredible, the stories that we hear. We have clients who are, let's say, from China, and they want to take their company public. Well, then they do it in, let's say, Hong Kong with their second passport. The opportunities are endless once you have multiple nationalities, you can really leverage that.
This has been so informative. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on our show. And we would love to have you back and to talk about the more controversial areas like due diligence.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. It's so easy. Conversation always flows, and anytime.
Thank you for being with us today on EB5 Investment Voice. The topics presented in this podcast is informational in nature and is not to be taken as specific legal advice. If you have questions on the topics presented in this episode or other investment immigration needs, please contact Mona Shaw and Associates. Mona and her attorney staff can be reached at mshawlaw.com. That's mshawlaw.com. Make sure you don't miss our next episode focusing on a different aspect of the EB5 program by subscribing to the podcast. While you're at it, leave us a rating on iTunes. If you really found this episode valuable, share it with someone else that could benefit from this information. Until then, I'll see you on the next episode of EB5 Investment Voice.